Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining me around the world for the inaugural Gridfox webinar, which is part one of a series of 5. Just by way of introduction, my name's Craig Nathan Moss. I'm Head of Engagement here at Gridfox. I'm based in Leeds, England, and I'll be doing all these 5 webinars throughout the series. So just to remind you where we are today, we're going to be covering getting started with a table and adding in data. So probably the most basic of all of these, and my intention throughout this series is to start off basic, and then gradually as we go through the weeks, and they're going to be held roughly every 2 weeks, we'll go to some of the more complex features until we cover everything that you need. And all these webinars will be posted on the same web page that you managed to navigate to in order to sign up for this one. So they're there to revisit if you need them further down the line. So I'm going to start off with the absolute basics because I do have people here that potentially haven't signed up to Gridfox before. So what you need to do to get going is quite simply visit the Gridfox website. On there, there will be a get started for free, and it allows you to register. Nothing too complex about getting going. All you've got to do is fill out your first name and last name, a company name if you have one. If not, you can just put that as personal or NA, an email address, set a password, and then agree to the terms and conditions, which you can see linked through here. There's nothing untoward, and hit continue. And when you hit continue, what's going to happen is you will receive a 6-digit code to the email address that you signed up with. And this page will refresh and take you to an area where you can enter that 6-digit code. And once you do so, you will be in the software. And this is how it's going to look. This is the first time you log in. So it's welcoming you to the software. It's giving you a little bit of indication about some of the things that you can do. And all you need to do to progress is click Get Started. Now, when I'm in here, it's prompting me to go through a welcome sequence in which it will point to me the key features of the software. And once I click on those, it'll then progress through to the next. I'm going to turn this off for now. I'm going to click out of it, should I say, because I'm just going to do this manually and show you exactly where everything lives. So ignore that part for now. Let me start on the left-hand side. So this is your home page. We have loads of help and support topics available. So first up, you can click Getting Started, and it will effectively restart this that you can see here, as you can see there. We have guided tours, and they will do one of 2 things. Let me just get rid of this so that you can see this better. Okay, so on the guided tour, it will show you 2 different options. Now, for those of you that haven't used Gridfox before, I think it's important at this stage to point out that there are 2 different modes to using it. So the first mode is you are in build mode, so you can create a project. Now, I'm going to take a lot of references to Excel when I'm explaining this today, because I know most people are familiar with that. So taking that as the example, when you're in build mode, if you think back to using an Excel spreadsheet, you're effectively setting the top columns across the top of that spreadsheet. So you're building what you want your spreadsheet to contain. Okay, so that's one mode that you can go in Gridfox. The second mode is the user mode. So imagine now you've built all the things that you want, and you're effectively now going to add the row data in. So the lines of data that are shown in that Excel spreadsheet. Now, going back to the first point in build mode, in Gridfox, there's 2 different ways to do this. You can either build it in screen mode or in table builder mode. And I'll show both of those later, so don't worry too much about it. The point behind this is both of them will give you guided tours. So if I click into Screen Builder and just select any of these, you'll see it has a short description on the left, and it will physically show you through a GIF how to do what the instructions are saying. And you can work through each one of those little references to get to where you need. The other thing we've got here is video tutorials. And if I click on that, it'll quite simply take you through to our YouTube channel, where you can see things in a different format. We have help documentation. This is effectively our knowledge base. So you can click in here anywhere and type any sort of field that you're looking to do. So Gantt chart has popped up there, and these are all the helpful sections that talk about Gantt charts and Gantt screens. And we have a community as well. So the community will take you through to I almost said public facing. It's public facing if you have a Gridfox account, as in everybody can use this if they've signed up. And in the community, you can ask certain things, request features, and request new templates be set up, which I'll come to in a second. And all these things are shown historically. So it may be that you've got a question that someone else has asked, and you can go back through the community and just see if your question can be answered in real time. And finally, you can report an issue, which will link you through to a web form. This will come through to a few people at Gridfox. It'll be myself, a project manager, and a technical team. So we can solve that without any problems once it's submitted. So that's on the left-hand side. Just above that, you'll see this little section that says, "Hi, Craig." And I've got a progress bar here, which is currently at 0%. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to ensure that as you learn the basics of the software, it is recorded against your profile. And so once you've done some of the key elements of building, you will get to that 100% level. And that should hopefully fill you with some confidence that you've kind of passed the test, you know what you're doing, and you're good to carry on building your projects. At the top right of the screen, that's also represented by this circular bar. And if I click into it, I can see exactly what characteristics make up this 100%. Under C, I have my name and obviously some settings, which will come to another session. You can change your password, and there's the same items on the left as in the help support area that you can click through on here. And similarly with the question mark, that's going to also direct you to some of our help options that I've just talked about. Okay, the only other thing is in the center of the page, you have the name you signed up with. You can rename that if you want, and you can also upload your own icon. So at the moment, I've got this green fox symbol. You can have your profile picture, a meme, anything that you want that's going to make it a bit more personal to you. And you'll see here it says no projects. That's because I've not built anything yet. As I do start to create things, this will populate. And there's no restrictions as to how many projects you can make. So this list can literally go on endlessly. Okay, so the one button I've not covered is new project. Let's get going with that one. And when I click it, I am now faced with 3 different options. I can use Screen Builder, I can use Table Builder, or I can use templates. Now on the templates, and I'll come to one of these later on so you can see exactly what it looks like. On the templates, you can effectively import all of your setup and some dummy data just to help you get going. And the idea would be you can then see how it's set up, delete the dummy data, and change it into your own things. Screen Builder and Table Builder, I mentioned before, are 2 different ways of building, but they hold the same data. I'm going to start with Screen Builder, and then we'll show you Table Builder later, just so you can see the difference between both. So I'm going to click on Screen Builder, and let's just call this Projects. So I've given it a title, and here we go. So I'll explain what's happening on this screen straight away. I'm actually going to go from right to left, which seems a bit bizarre, but it makes sense once I do it. It's asking me to create a name for my table. Now, once again, imagine this is your Excel spreadsheet. So what is this going to contain? Well, on this Excel spreadsheet for me, this is going to be a list of my projects. So I'll type it project. It'll automatically default and show you a plural. Now, going left of this, I have effectively my blank spreadsheet right here where it says drag new fields. So this is what I was talking about being in build mode. We want to determine what those top columns actually do and what they're titled as. And we do that by dragging in these fields on the left-hand side. And you can see there are many different types of fields that we can utilize. And in session 2, I will be covering what all of these mean. But for now, let's just show what it looks like when I drag a text field in. So it's giving me that column, and it's saying, what do you want this to be called? Well, if I'm going to monitor projects, and to give you an insight, what I'm thinking of doing is having top-line project details with then tasks associated with each one of those projects. So in my project field name, I want the name of the project. Maybe I want a date because I want to know when it's due. And I'm also going to bring this list field in. Now, the list field is effectively a way of predetermining what you can select in that particular row. So if you liken this to an Excel spreadsheet, there is a capability that allows you to create drop-down options where it isn't a free text box. Someone has to select from those predetermined options. Now, I'll drag these all in, and there's 3 dots next to each one of these. And I'm not going to labor on this point, but what you should be aware of is, depending on the field type you've brought in, will determine what's shown when you select these 3 dots. So to give you an example, if I click on name, I've got is reference, is unique, is required, is visible on search results screen. Don't worry too much about those. We'll cover those later on. But if I click on due date, you have the same things, except you've also got an option to tick which will default to today's date. So it's basically saying when you add a new record in, it will default that field to whatever the date is. And on my status one, I have the ability to add these list items. So my project could be in the following statuses. It could be in the backlog. We haven't started it yet. It could be in progress, or it could be completed. And when I do this, there's an option for me to actually add colors to each of these. Now that might seem pretty arbitrary at this moment. However, you'll see later on that visually this is really useful when you start to have loads of items in. So there's no limit to how many columns you have in here. I'm just going to stop at 3 for now, just to demonstrate what happens next. And I'm going to go and try and save this actual table. And when I do, it's popping up with the notification to say we need one of these columns to be your reference field. And note how it's only giving me 2 options. It's giving me name and it's giving me due date. It is not allowing that status to be a reference field. I'm going to explain more about what reference fields are. So on an Excel spreadsheet, for example, if you were trying to reference a line, and that means you're trying to read data from a certain area on that line, in order to do it, it has to be a unique value. So for example, I can't use status because if I have more than 3 tasks, there is going to be a duplication because one of them will be, backlog could be twice or in progress could be twice. It's not going to be unique. The same thing could be said of due dates because it may be that I have projects ending on the same date. So in this scenario, name is probably going to work best for me because I can title my projects differently and therefore they'll all be unique. Now, it may be the case that you have projects with the same name. There is a way of overcoming this, which I'll show you shortly. But for the purpose of progressing on, let's name this reference field as our name, and that is now my unique value. So my project's going to save when I do this, and you'll see it populate on the left-hand side. This is the one part of the screen I've not covered. It's effectively like saying that's my first spreadsheet. And as I do more, you'll see more things being populated down here. But now I've built that, and I want to start adding some row data. So I'm going to click on user mode at the top, and I'm now going to click on new. So we're no longer in build mode. This is our results screen. There's obviously nothing there yet because we've not populated it with anything. But let me click on new right here, and I'm going to add something in. So maybe my first project, maybe I'm marketing my company, is a social media campaign. And that's going to be due, I don't know, by the end of September. And at the moment, that is sat in backlog. Let's put progress, actually. So I can save that. And that is my first record on my project screen. I'm going to do one more. Let's call this one website build. And the due date for that is a little bit quicker. It's the middle of August. However, that's not been started yet. So I now have 2 records against my project, and I can click into them. I can see the data there. I can add documents on, which I'll come to later, and I can amend any of these details too if I wanted. Okay, so pretty simple stuff so far. Now then, we're going to show the other way of building, which is through Table Builder. Now, if I click on this, I mentioned before the data is exactly the same as I've created in Screen Builder. And you can see that right there. We've got the name, the due date, and the status. The great thing about Table Builder is you can see all your tables in one place, or Excel spreadsheets. And that means that once you've got it in this position, you can start to form relationships between them. But before we go into that, I'm going to add a secondary table. And I mentioned here that it may be each project has a number of different tasks associated with it. So in this tasks field, I'm going to have probably a name again. This time, maybe I've got a start date and an end date. Start date. And another date field there can be an end date. Maybe I have a user field. So who is going to be responsible for this task? And maybe I've got a status again as well. So that can be status. And I'm going to probably replicate the others that I had in there in my projects because it's not going to be too dissimilar. In progress, back, completed. And I'm actually going to add one more, and that can be abandoned because the likelihood of us abandoning a whole project is slim, but it may be that we actually start to abandon some of these tasks if we realize, having analyzed, that they're not as important as we originally thought. So that is that set. And there's one more thing I'm going to add in here, and that is going to be a larger text area just for some notes in case we wanted to put that in. Okay. So as I go to save this project, the same thing is going to happen. It's requiring a reference field. Now this time, I'm not going to select one of the fields that I've created. This time, I'm going to let the system add an auto counter field. And when I click that and save it, you'll see it goes to the top as an ID. Now, all this is going to do every time I create a new task is it's going to give it a numerical value. So it will start at 1, it'll then progress to 2, 3, and carry on in that same vein. But because that's always a unique number, we can refer to that as our reference. So now that I've saved it, I'm going to go back to our user mode and just populate a couple of tasks with some new data. So let's call this one Research LinkedIn. I've just got my social media campaigns in mind when I'm doing this. So we can start that today and we'll end it next week. I'm responsible for this task. It's in progress. And is it worth it? So maybe I'm contemplating whether having a LinkedIn profile is beneficial at all. And you'll see that that task ID has been added as number 1, which I was referring to before. Let's do another one. Let's do find influencers. So we want some social media influencers to effectively, just put this in here, in progress, effectively validate our project, and it maybe we have to pay them as well. Validate product and find cost. Okay, so as we're looking at this now, we've effectively got 2 separate projects. We've got our projects tab, 2 separate tables, sorry. We've got our projects table and we've got our tasks table, and they're both on the left-hand side. As I showed you with projects, you can click into these and you can see all this data and you can edit it. Now, at the moment, you might be thinking, well, where's the benefit of this over an Excel spreadsheet, with the exception of it's a nicer interface and it's easier to build things? And the answer is, at the moment, there isn't. However, this is where it starts to really come into its own. I've gone back into Table Builder, and now I'm going to form a relationship between my projects and my tasks. Because instead of having these two separate spreadsheets that don't talk to each other, I want a way of connecting the information. So I'm going to click on this little link icon in projects, and I'm then going to do the same thing on tasks, and that's going to connect them. Now, this is asking me to set up the type of relationship that I want to use. This is quite a complex situation, and it's covered in a lot of detail in Series 5, where we're going to focus pretty much purely on relationships. However, for the purpose of this, let me make it quite clear as to why I'm going to choose this top option. What we're saying is projects can have many tasks. So in the examples I've just created, I'm researching my social media is my project. And within there, at the moment, I've got two tasks. One about LinkedIn to see whether it's worthwhile setting up a profile. And number two, to find social media influencers. So that one project has multiple tasks. So in this scenario, that's correct. I'm going to apply that right there. And I'm going to save it. Now, if I go back to user mode and I click into one of my projects, there is a new option appeared here, which is this social media campaign / tasks. And what that's saying is I can now bring the task data in so that it's connected to the specific project. And I do that by clicking this little down arrow right here. Now I can create a brand new task. So maybe that's something that I've not yet built on my task table on the left, or I can import those existing records. And if I do that, it brings up the two that I've built that are available to me. So I'm going to select both of those and I'm going to bring them in. So now, if I come back out of this, when I click into my social media campaign, I can see all the tasks that are relevant to that specific project. Obviously, website build, there's the options there, but we haven't done anything yet because we've attached no task to it. So on that vein, let's add a new one in, and let's say research host. I'm going to do that today, and I'm going to crack it out in one day. It's assigned to me, and that's in progress too. Now, when I'm selecting this user, there's something else you should know. The only option at the moment is me, because I am the only user in this project. This is going to be available to anybody you invite to actually use your project with you. And that's another great thing about Gridfox compared to those spreadsheets. You can invite people in and have a lot more collaboration because it updates in real time. So say, for example, I've got a team of 3 people. I can invite those other 3 into this, and we can all see the same things. When one person updates it, it's updated for everybody. And now you can see that that task is associated to my website build. It's still being added in here. So I'm still getting these tasks in here. But at the moment, I'm able to associate them with my specific project. Okay, so those are the fundamental basics I wanted to cover. Now, I'm going to do a few more things here. And that would be, I'm thinking of this as a real user. And there's some things that are going to frustrate me on here. So the first thing is when I'm clicking into social media campaign or the other one, I don't need to see this task ID. Like, that is irrelevant to me. I don't care what number it is. I just care what the name is. And we can hide things, and we can also reorganize what comes first and second and third and so on. And to do that, you go back into Screen Builder. Now, when I'm in here, I talked about not wanting to see that ID number, which belongs on our tasks. So if I click on that, we can see that task ID right here. Now, to hide it, all I've got to do is drag it across with my left mouse button into the section on the right-hand side. And that has now gone. You will not be able to see that anymore. If I save it and go back, I show you that that's true, both in my tasks table and if I click into any one of these as well. Now, the other thing you can do, which you probably noticed in here, is you can move things around. So maybe the user is more important to me than the start and end date, and I just want that to be sat in second position. Again, you can do that. And you can really move these around to do whatever you need, to show whatever you want as well. Now, the other thing I'm thinking of as a user is, do I actually need to see this table here? It's important because it's containing all the information that's then attached to my projects. But it may be that the way I work dictates that actually I click into social media and I just look at the tasks underneath that specific project. I don't need a list of everything. If I go back into screen builder mode, I have the option to actually hide some of these just by using this little eye symbol. So if I click on that now, I go back to user mode, tasks is hidden from where I need it to be. I've only got projects. But if I click into any of these, the tasks are still connected next to it right there. So just to bear in mind, you can go into Screen Builder and really customize the way things look when you see it as a user. Okay, so let me summarize at this point. What I also wanted to say, and should have done at the beginning, is this is an interactive session. Now, there is a question and answer box that you'll find on your toolbar of Zoom. Feel free to ask anything that you want in there. I will start to come to some questions shortly. However, in the meantime, I'm just going to do a quick refresh. So feel free to fire those questions in, and I'll come back to them once I've gone through a refresh of what we did. So to get started, quite simply, we navigated to the Gridfox website, and on there was a try Gridfox for free option at the top right. I then quite simply typed in my first name, last name, my company name if it was applicable. If not, I could just put personal or NA. Enter my email, set a password, agree to the terms and hit continue. That then provided me with a 6-digit code, and this screen will have refreshed and would then allow me to put that 6-digit code in that had been emailed to me. And then when I came into my screen, I was prompted here. This was blank because we hadn't built any projects at that point, but I can amend my personal details here. All the help and support I'll need is down the left-hand side. What you'll also see here is, so I just refreshed my page to show you what that looked like when we first joined. What you'll also see here is your progress, which will change as you start to go through. I talked about the fact that there are settings and other help criteria up here as well. What we then did was we created new projects, and we were faced with the option of building either through the screen builder, which we started off with, or the table builder, which you saw later on. If you click that table builder, it will bring you back to that second part I showed you, where you can see all your tables together. Now, obviously, when you first do that, you won't have any tables, but it's that screen that you'll see. I also talked about templates, but didn't really show you what they look like. And now that you've seen some of the basics of Gridfox, I'm now going to give you an indication as to what these are. So we've tried to build these to accommodate as many people as we can think of. We're always open to more suggestions, but let's just take Sales Tracker, for example. When I click on that, I can preview what it looks like. So I can see what this is going to display, and I can click into these. It's actually real time, and I can see information. But let's just use this template to really show you what you can build, because this started off the same as we built. We had, as you can see on the left-hand side, one table, then maybe two. And from there, we started to grow it and build things out. All the things that you're going to see, I will be teaching through the forthcoming webinars. But just to give you an idea, this is the way we built this, is like a deals board. So imagine that you're prospecting for new customers. You've got qualifying criteria, proposal, it's under review, and it's awaiting start. And you can drag and drop these to different areas. So maybe Pale has been qualified now and they want a proposal. You can just drag it across to that proposal phase. So again, we'll come to this another time. You can add filters into your information. So in all the deals, I can separate them by their stages. And I can also see a dashboard of everything that's going on, whether that be the financials, whether it be the stage they're all at. There's loads of things you can do. I don't want to detract from the summary I'm giving you, but that just gives you an indication to some of those projects that you can bring and create yourself. So we then went into screen build mode. I talked about the fact that you just drag these fields across here and it starts to create those top columns, which is similar to an Excel spreadsheet where you're determining what you then want to add in terms of row data. We then added some row data by clicking on user mode, and that was all found in here. We then went to table mode and built a separate table. And I showed you the fact that when you add record details in there, they're separate from projects. They're effectively two separate spreadsheets until you start forming these relationships, which we did, as you can see by that arrow. I then talked about the ability to customize your view. So you can hide things, you can reorganize things, and really set it up the way that you want it to be. So that's pretty much coming to a close for today's session. There are some questions that I'm going to cover. There was a couple of questions that I had before I even started this session from other users that I've been speaking to that I thought might be quite beneficial for you guys as well. The first one, which I've already touched on, is can you share this product with other users? And the answer to that is yes. You can do that by inviting users at the top. And I'm going to cover this in a lot more detail later on. But as a top line, you can enter their email address here and set their status to what they can and can't do. So for example, a project admin would give someone the same access rights as what you've just seen me navigate through. So they can build things, they can edit builds, they can delete builds. It's basically somebody who's going to control this whole system. And that includes all the records as well. If you select someone to have edit only mode, that is going to allow them to add records. So hit new and create what they want. It allows them to edit those records and it allows them to delete those records. Or you can have someone with view only permissions where actually they can just see things but can't do anything. You can get a lot more granular than that, which we'll cover another time. But as top line, all you do is put their email address in and invite them using one of those three options. Okay, the other one that came in, I've actually already covered because someone said, I'm working on my projects and some of the tables down here are quite confusing. Can we hide them? Just as a refresher, yes, you can using some of these buttons on here that you see. Okay, let's go to some more. So what can you add to documents? Okay, and I know I touched on this earlier, so maybe should have gone into it in more detail at that point. If I go into any of my records, I can actually start to add documents using this button here. So let's go into one that's probably more relevant. I'm going to go into find influencers. So if I'm on a practical level trying to find some social media influencers, it may be that I use and tag them all the records in Gridfox because it'd be easier to look through later on. Let's assume I don't do that at this point. Let's assume I've got a Microsoft Word document and I'm literally tagging and saying, Twitter, these are the potential influencers. Facebook, these are the potential influencers. Well, it may be that I then want to upload that document in here. And when I click upload, it'll point to my hard drive, allow me to do that. But the files that you can bring in are Word documents, you can do PDF documents, you can do images, you can basically do most things and just attach it in here as a reference for you later on. And now that I'm on that level as well, I should probably also mention that if I go back to one of these projects, I can import and export data. The reason this just triggered in my head is I thought someone may want to import an Excel spreadsheet. Well, actually, you don't need to. There are ways you can do it through the system. Again, we'll cover this in more detail another time, but you can bring any existing spreadsheets into Gridfox and prevent you from literally adding all these line items again. Now, the way that I'd recommend you do it, just in case someone wants to give it a go before we get to that point, is if you build your columns first, so your name, due date, and status in this case, I would then advise exporting it with blankness. There's no line details yet, just export it with those top columns. The reason being is Gridfox needs these names to be exact. And if there's a capital and not a capital on the other one, if there's a space after name, for example, or in between due date, it needs to match everything exactly. And you can guarantee that when you export it, you could then copy your information onto that export and import it back in. It'll have no issues because those characters are exactly the same. Okay, another question that's come through. Does each person that you invite in need to have a fully paid Gridfox license? So yeah, so basically when I go back to this invite user button, it's asking in any one of these options, do they need to have a paid license? The answer to that is yes, they would. However, when you're inviting people to your account. So let me try and explain that better. Let's say, for example, you have 20 projects. When you invite someone into one of these, they would then have access to everything if that's the way you wanted to do it. So for example, if you had 20 projects, you had staff of 5, and you wanted some to see 4 projects, some to see 3 projects, some to see 1, etc., etc. You wouldn't need to invite them all for each project. You just need 5 users and then select which projects you wanted them in to use. So the answer is yes, you'd pay for each user, but it's across all projects, not individual projects. Okay, I want to track staff absence. How would you do that? Okay, so I am here to guide outside of just this webinar. I can give assistance and recommendations on how to build your projects. The one thing I would say is when you're building projects, everyone has their own bespoke needs. And that's where Gridfox is really useful because you can customize it exactly the way you want it. So the reason I'm saying that is one person tracking staff absence might need to do it very differently from the second person doing it. But I give you my own independent advice on how I do this. So I'd have it set up in the same way. I'd have 2 tables with that same relationship. But on this side here, I would have staff. So that would be a record of all your staff employees. So you might have name, you might have first name, surname, you might have staff ID, which would be the unique identifier. It might be they've got a staff number. You could go as much as you want. You could track, home address, you could have phone number in there, department. So I'd have that as the first table as your employee. And in the second table, I would have absences. And then I'd probably track it by saying start of absence with a date. I'd have end of absence. What else could I put in there? Maybe a status. So you could track things like the absence was due to illness. It was maybe even a holiday if you wanted, a bereavement, whatever it is that you need to track. And you could even have like a checkbox to say doctors know or back to work interview, whatever you wanted to capture in there. And the way that would then operate is you'd have your staff member in here. You could click into that staff member, and in the same way as you've seen with these tasks, it would list all those absences. And I think it'd be really useful because from that point, you could start to build other things like the dashboard I showed you from Sales Tracker. And maybe you've got things here that says, these are my employees and these are the number of times they've been off ill. This is the prime reason people go off ill. You could identify, stress, illness, bereavement, whatever it is. But if it was me, that's how I build it in the same way as this, just with different titles and fields going in there as well. Okay, well, I think we've come to the end of the questions. I'm going to leave this open for another couple of minutes. I wanted to thank you all for attending. I will be sending round a recording of this once we've got it kind of ready to go. And it'll also be uploaded onto that website where you first signed up. So really thank you for attending. A couple of other things I wanted to mention before I let you go, and that is right here. We have the ability to sign up for a free 14-day trial. If you haven't already, you can just visit Gridfox and go through that process. And I'm also happy if you want to help you go through a one-to-one session, and that will help build what you need. It can be throwing ideas at me. It can be literally, where do I begin? I can help you go through that process. And the final thing is you can email me directly, and that can be anything. So it can be feedback from this session. It can be, again, asking for some guidance. All those things are available to you. So I'll leave those links on screen for you to see for the next couple of minutes. And like I said, any questions, any answers, any feedback, please just pop in there and I'll gladly answer them. But if not, I just wanted to thank you again for your time, and hopefully we'll see you at series number 2, which is in 2 weeks' time.